this week. Exactly the same.
Are we all ready to start meeting? Right. I have to be very gentle maybe because it's my first meeting, so I might make mistakes, so I apologise before. Okay. May I welcome everybody, committee members and officers to the Prosperous Communities Overview and Scrutiny meeting. Can I remind you that this meeting is now being webcast, and can I ask you to turn off or put your mobile phones on silent? And please, when you speak clearly into the microphones. Can I confirm that as a council we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our meetings, but confirm that we've not had any notification or request to use Welsh today. So therefore the meeting will be today conducted in English only. Please can I remind you to sign the attendance register and confirm any declarations that you may have. And can I ask if we've had any apologies, please?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillors Veronica Crick and Faye Jones.
Yes. Right, so we've gone to item 3. Just to remind members that these minutes relate to the local housing strategy, and can I ask that you scan through them to see if they meet for accuracy and that they are a true account of that meeting.
I'll say it's a true account. I'll say it's a true account.
Well, I don't think much over there because it was handed over some of it. Councillor Evans was there. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to hand you over now to Rebecca to give us an update on any actions that were outstanding.
Thank you, Chair. There are no outstanding actions on the action sheet, so they've all been completed. Thank you.
Right, so we need an update on progress on any of the recommendations. So can I hand over to you once again, please?
Thank you again, Chair. So as you will see set out before you, the purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on the progress made implementing scrutiny recommendations previously accepted or noted for consideration by the executive member over the previous 18 months prior to Christmas. And it's asking you that you consider the progress made on those recommendations and for you to assess the impact of that scrutiny activity. So you should all have the Appendix 1, and you will find an update on recommendation pro forma for each item that was considered by a previous committee, but that now reports to this Prosperous Committee because there has been some changeovers in the portfolios. Can I just please stress you are not here to re-scrutinise these issues today. You are only here to assess whether you are satisfied that progress has been made and to determine whether you want to continue in monitoring those items or whether you're happy to say that you're satisfied and leave those going forward.
Rachel, can I invite you to come and give us the item, please?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. The first one obviously is on Torvine training, and the Education Committee previously looked at this item in March 2018, and that was in light of a nesting inspection which had been received in 2017, and it was to review the post-inspection action plan and ensure that all steps were in place to basically, you know, because Torvine was had the status of needing improvement, and so it had a post-inspection action plan, and the scrutiny was about did we have appropriate governance in place to help Torvine training to sort of get into a recovery position, were the targets appropriate, and was the action plan covering everything. It was a really good scrutiny session. In terms of the recommendations, we did respond, and I think so there's been quite a lot of movement which over the last year, and the good news is that in trying to think when it was May, the end of May this year, we had a revisit from Estin and their recommendation to their lead inspectors that they are taking us out of monitoring, which means that we have made all the improvements that they wanted us to see. We haven't had it in writing yet because it takes a while for the inspectorate to do their thing, but that was the news. We have a performance inspection, performance improvement subgroup which is chaired by the cabinet member. It was Councillor Yole, it will now be Councillor Clark, which has representatives on there from colleague Gwent support us, and also the lady called Janet Jones, who is previously worked for Aston and has been working with us as a critical friend. That group will still continue, because whilst we've been taken out of monitoring and Torfaen training are doing really well, we're not complacent in terms of keeping an eye on attainment, and that we're sort of like seeing good numbers of apprenticeships coming through. So that's like mainly the substantive item on Torfaen training.
We're keeping an eye on it, because I don't want it to end up back to where we had to have Ashton come in and make recommendations. I think we need to keep a regular eye on it to stop it dropping in its performance. And I think the committee you set up, I think, will hopefully do the right job.
Would you like future updates? It is important. I think it would be, we'd benefit from it. Okay.
So members, I'll note that you're satisfied with progress
At the
today,
moment,
but
but
you still would like to monitor it in a year's time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Should we go on to next item? Yeah. Which is the review of the dog fouling. Oh, sorry. Oh, you can go. Oh, no, I thought I missed somebody then. Do apologise. I do apologise, Rachel.
I said to Kate, I said, do you want to swap? No, obviously this was a big piece of work for the Safer Scrutiny Committee. Looked at it very, very carefully and actually made some really valid and useful recommendations to officers and the executive member, which did change some of the actions. And I think that is identified. The signage was changed, the communications was changed, more engagement with the RSLs. So there's a lot was done as a result of scrutiny impact. Obviously, in December 18, the public space protection orders have come in force. And I will say, we have had a couple of signs destroyed in certain key locations. Councillor Jones is well aware of some of those. But on the whole, we have seen quite a significant improvement in those areas where we've put the orders in place in terms of dog fouling. Obviously, next week sees the change of the new enforcement service, which sits alongside this as well, with the move to an in-house service as well. So again, scrutiny did make a really valuable contribution to this. It is something now which is business as usual. If this was to be kept on scrutiny, it would probably link more to the enforcement. The ongoing effectiveness of the enforcement service rather than the PSPOs in general would be my advice to members, but obviously that's up for you to determine.
Happy with that, because it'll come in with a car park and enforcement as well next week. I mean, we can keep it.
No, I think I noticed the response about dog areas and working with community councils. It's between us there again. I think it's one that always comes up at community councils, and maybe there's some mileage in there. Keeping it review, as you suggest, is not a bad idea. I think in terms of enforcement, then obviously in with the car parking, and it seems sensible. There isn't a thing in here about publicity education, which is the other aspect. Did we have it in these recommendations? I can't remember.
I wasn't the scrutiny officer.
No,
so if it's not listed there, it wouldn't have been
it's not.
the recommendation.
So recommendation 6, consideration be given to raising awareness and educating people. So prior to the implementation of the PSBOs, there's a lot of social media activity, press activity was undertaken, and committee reviewed the signage that was going to be used out in the community as well.
The emphasis on the beginning bit rather than the other bit. Signage is something, but the actual education, because as a community councillor rather than borough councillor, I've been that for about 26 years, and I always remember the stuff that was positive was about the good practice, but that is obviously not what we're scrutinising, but in a lot of ways it seems There was a whole thing the other day about these bags and that on social media, and it struck me. I'm not going back over this again, but that is such an annoyance, and it's your officer's time. So, yeah, no recommendation, what we just said about going back at the enforcement angle.
Sorry, members, can I just point out that the parking now will go to, enforcement will go to cleaner communities. It doesn't come under the remit of this committee anymore, sorry.
The only thing that I got to say about the dog fouling, particularly up with me, like this College Gwent, we've put dog, we have things going up there to stop people going across with dogs.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, in College Gwent, there are actually 2 public right-of-ways that go through there. So, you know, the people that I've seen taking their dogs, I've always said to them, you know, please just keep the right-of-way. And it should be all right, you know, if we've got the dog things and all. But I know some people have been challenged and said, oh, you ain't going all right in here, but there is 2 public right-of-ways going through the building, you know. So, and I've let College Gwent know that we did that some years ago.
I know the discussion was now that there was a lot of discussion on the Blind Bran woodland site about festoons. That's the polite expression for these bags full of poo, and it goes back to litter policy and whether people make the effort to pick it up and then dump it, and it's inexplicable to people managing those sites. So it's the education and education and the prosecuting people together, because it's inexplicable why people do that.
So, do you have any other comments?
I think people are going to be happy about the new enforcement officer starting. I do think we need a lot more dog bins in the areas, especially on the really well-walked routes, because a lot of people complaining the bags are just thrown on the side. If we could get a few more bins out there, it would be a lot better.
So once again, members, note that you're satisfied with progress, but that you want to keep it for monitoring in a year's time again with the updates. Yeah. Yeah, because of highways, that comes. You're doing public health side of it, but parking enforcement comes under highways, which will go to cleaner communities now, with the changes in portfolios that took place in March.
We could have a joint, if this was to be reviewed, it could be a joint meeting of both committees on the overall enforcement service in, say, a year's time once it's bedded down. That is an option.
Make a recommendation. Yeah. It's fine.
So again, this was one which, I'm trying to think which one it was. Cleaner did, but now library sits within the Prosperous portfolio, and the scrutiny did a big piece of work because this was all linked to a budget saving of initially 250,000 and then 200,000. It was reprofiled down on the provision that it went back through the scrutiny process for members to be assured about the levels of service provision and what was being proposed. And it was a complete redirection for the service to achieve the 200,000. There was job losses, but the original proposal was 15, it ended up being 5, and it also resulted in the modernisation of the service with the introduction of self-serve in Pontypool and Cwmbran, whereas it had already been achieved in Blaenavon. You'll see that actually we've put as a recommendation for your scrutiny basket for next year to review the effectiveness of the self-service kiosk as a potential item. So again, in terms of the scrutiny's contribution towards it, it was in terms of looking at the draft strategy. They made lots of recommendations, particularly on the targets, which were absolutely accepted. The new staffing structure was sort of like looked at in light of it. The one area that has not been yet progressed is the Friends of Library group. You know, that was very clear, and we've been honest about that. And that at the moment being that the officer time has been on putting in place the new structure within the department, because there's a big change management piece as you're taking out layers of management and redefining roles, and also the introduction of the self-service, the liaison with the company and the SRS, and that change management piece. So they are still committed to looking at that. It just, you know, there were other things which had to be undertaken first. I think sort of like there's been a lot of consideration about creating the safe spaces and also about the sort of the IT side within the library. And we've put in our update, we're seeing a reduction in use of the computers within the library as more people are coming in with their smartphones and accessing the public Wi-Fi and their own tablets, and the use is still being monitored. Those is one of the recommendations. We keep up to date technology. There's not a budget within the library's budget for replacement of the kit, but actually if people are bringing their own kit in and just accessing the public Wi-Fi, is that still okay? You know, and I think so that's sort of where we're looking at. So the scrutiny impact, it was really beneficial because it did help with the, particularly on the definition of targets and measures within the strategy. Did look at the staffing levels and the opening hours, because obviously we were doing some changes, and as I said, we have put it into the basket for consider for future scrutiny for this term.
With the IT problems in Cwmbran, I know they say they've reduced the ongoing problems. Is it problems that might resurface again, or is it completely sorted now?
We did have an issue of the line into Cwmbran, which has been resolved, and that was the key issue in terms of the lines being made bigger, basically in terms of capacity. So no, unless all of a sudden usage goes through the roof, which we're not seeing, and they are monitoring it, then no, it shouldn't be a problem.
I did both of these, and I remember what you said about it. There was a lot of work, and we're just reviewing progress. I think that's actually good, because it's a very emotive subject, and you took a hit up in Blaenavon, which I think is actually bedded in very well from what I can see. And Cwmbran is very well used. From what I would not want this to go any further than it has, and that was the view taken in the Cleaner Committee, because I'm probably the only member of the Cleaner Committee here that did this one. I think we took quite a lot on that. So no, it's actually been quite successful. It's one of my favourite spaces in Cwmbran to sit. Now, I do like sitting there, and I think the community wouldn't like it very much if it went much the other. It's a popular space.
It's a popular space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially on the self-serve.
I'll just say the one thing I do take about the safer spaces and stuff like that, and I think you've done very well considering the need to take a lot out of it. That's what does worry me. But I think in terms, we did make the point when we did it that we can get more out of what we've done for less. That's always a good way of looking at it. I think you know the bits about the Friends of. I understand that that's not going to be easy. It never was. And it's I made the point at the time about it's a commons, it's a space that people feel like they own. You certainly do the blind. I like the Blaenavon one as well. It's good. My worry is the one over here, funnily enough, because it's a very small little space in a lot of ways. So yeah, no, I like we keep an eye on it, but not necessarily at the top of the bag. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So members, you're satisfied with the progress, and obviously there is an item for you to consider, as Rachel mentioned, in your visioning items going forward. Is that okay? Yeah.
The assisting and driving for both employment opportunities and new employers in Torfaen. And once again, we call upon Rachel to give us a report.
This was one which Cleaner looked at, and I think this is the one which actually might be really helpful context for scrutiny to actually refresh themselves on, because a lot of the basket of items almost sit underneath this world. This was a very strategic item which covered at that time the communities world and also economic development, and it was about bringing them. Just committee wanted an overview of what was going on at the moment. You'll see in the basket for visioning, we've broken a lot of this down into its individual parts for scrutiny to look at. So it's a very, very large piece of work. And the recommendations, as you can see, there were 13 of them, because it was such a big piece of work. And I think, part of the first recommendation was about the strategy. Well, actually, one of the visioning baskets is the new strategy, where what we're looking to do is bring economy and skills together. So that's sort of like acting upon that recommendation. Just looking about procurement, the committee was told that there's an economic forum. It is run by the businesses within the borough, of which we then do play a part of looking at procurement options, and we've been supporting them. And you'll have seen maybe from our recent cabinet report on property services that we're changing our procurement strategy to go lotting, to allow SMEs to enable them to bid better into our procurement processes. I think obviously there's a whole load of discussion that there's a future about tier 1 funding and convergence funding. Obviously that is all up for debate in relation to Brexit, and again we've put that as one of the basket items for ESF future funding for the skills and employability work that the department do. Then you've got another one about the Valleys Task Force and Springboard 2. Again, we've got on the basket for this committee to review the Springboard 2 business case if we decide to take that forward. And then there's recommendations about higher education reps on the PSB. I know that was sent over to the team, and I'm trying to think what the update on that one was. And I think the PSB has its existing work plan. So I think overall, most of the recommendations are ones which are coming forward into work plans for this year, or as proposals for visioning. It was very high level, as I said, and it was about the background of where we are. So I hope that's a bit of an introduction, because it was a huge one.
It's been a valuable piece of work, and I'm sure we all think this is how important it's going to be. Chris, you want to say? Steve?
My question is, for working with the higher education to get these skills into the area, are we making sure they're the right skills for the right businesses coming in? Because sometimes, how can I say, because I run my own business, that they haven't got the right skills for the right job. So these courses got to reflect, if businesses are coming in, they are the right skills for that particular work.
I think so. This has been, one which, when we put it forward, there is you'll hear from the business community that they are struggling to recruit in their key sectors, particularly some of our sectors in Torfaen in terms of high-end engineering, and we haven't got the demand coming from the pupils to take up the courses. So we've got a bit of a divergence between employment needs and take-up. And what the colleges then won't do, because the world of apprenticeships and traineeships is basically a commercial world, you need to have the footfall in to put the courses on. So it's almost a bit of a chicken and egg. So we're actually scoping out with the PSB at the moment, actually, to do a trial for a shared apprenticeship scheme on engineering and welding in particular, because a lot of our manufacturers, we've got a lot of companies within the borough which are demanding these skills and are struggling to recruit for that level. It is something I think Welsh Government have now recognised, because the apprenticeships and traineeships world has become very, I would say, you know, it's been led by the pupil rather than led by the employer, and that's been a trend, not just recently, it's been in the last 10, 20 years, and it's how we then do that shift of the two, and obviously, you know, STEM, science, technology, engineering and maths are the ones which they're trying to push into these sectors, recognising their priority sectors for the future. But currently, training providers aren't filling those courses and therefore aren't making the money on them, and still it's a commercial world, so they're not putting them on. So there is this dichotomy at the moment which we're trying to find a balance of and looking to disrupt the market by doing a different model.
The only reason I ask that question, because if they haven't got the right skills and these employees are coming in, there are a lot of apprenticeships out there that doesn't cover particular aspects that these employees are looking for. I mean, welding is a very specialist subject normally, but it can be used in other aspects. But it all depends what type of grade of welding you do, you know. So if they're only putting on, you know, the light welding courses rather than the heavy, that ain't going to accommodate, you know, the big engineering firms.
Should be on there. Yes, I just wanted to ask, whereas I'm very much in favour of courses being pupil-led, how much and what's the body of work that has been done? Because the problem that we very often got is that business have a certain set of skills that they're looking for. Education have a certain amount of courses that they can offer. Yeah. Children have a picture of what they think employment is and the subjects that they're doing and what future employability is going to be. Having a child of a certain age at the moment, what I see is there's a disconnect between going into schools and effectively saying, listen, when you go into the world of business, these are the skills that are required, they're very exciting, these are the sort of courses that you need to be looking at, and these are the benefits to you in the employment marketplace. There's such a disconnect between what business wants and what they need, the subjects that children are sitting in school to, for the better they want to be doing it, to achieve targets or whatever. And there's this huge void of disconnect where children have got no concept of employment. So how do we actually more effectively join these two marketplaces together? And I'm just wondering whether you've started to do a body of work to bridge that gap and more effectively talk between the two. Basically, they're conflicting spheres, they are. Children want to do as little as possible, employers want to do as much as possible. The skills are missing in the middle, and just to sort of ask the question more succinctly, children need to understand, if I sit this course, where will that lead me to, and what employment opportunities have I got?
No, I get it. I think it's fair to say the reason for us bringing the Economy and Skills Department together, so the rationale for my restructure last year was to bridge that link. And I saw, like, when I presented it to full council last year, you know, we have been offering a skills provision, which has been excellent. You know, our work on skills, obviously, Torvine training are now doing and attaining what they need to be attaining in terms of the qualifications for apprenticeships and traineeships. But there has been, as you said, it's been quite demand-led. Again, you know, Torvine training, whilst it's in a council space, is still a commercial operation. And then we've got the employers saying one thing. So what sort of, like, you know, Dave is currently doing is looking at how do we bridge that gap. We're not there yet at all. And I think the way we see it is we do recognise the current model for how apprenticeships are funded, how employers are supported and children are engaged they don't connect at the moment at a national level, I think it's fair to say. So that's why we are looking at a shared apprenticeship model where somebody would become a host, because some of our small and medium-sized employers, they can't even afford to take on apprentices because they haven't got the capacity or the time to do the paperwork, the administration, or they sometimes can't afford for the day release because they need a body within their company. So by us having a hosted system of somebody centrally taking, doing the payroll, doing the HR, sorting out 6 months in one company, 6 months in another, 6 months in another, learning different skills, it's a different offer. What we need to try and do is get the interest and the take-up, but we're considering putting a bid into the foundational economy funding from Welsh Government to try and sort of build that up. It's not perfect, we're not there yet. There's also the role of Careers Wales, who have the strategic role from Welsh Government, and I would say that if this was something scrutiny wanted to look at, Careers Wales would be one you would want to have round the table to ask their role, because in terms of particularly the work with the vulnerable young people and their pathways, Careers Wales have now been given the lead for that, not the councils. So they are key in terms of their role within schools for that promotion and education.
Very slightly. What I hear from there, you've got a system at the moment that is demand-led. In as much that that we're still looking at that the children are driving what they want. That's effectively what demand-led means. Now, I am pretty certain if they were given the correct information, then you would find that the demand would follow. And I think this is the bit that we really need to have a look at. And I think quite rightly that maybe Careers Wales might be someone we need to scrutinise on a much more effective basis, because if because I'm sure, am I right in saying that they're the people who drive the career service actually in schools, or are they a separate standalone body afterwards?
They are a standalone funded body by Welsh Government. Schools will also have their lead officers internally, but Careers Wales often will be the ones driving it within schools. Yeah.
Interesting points. Now, not redoing this scrutiny, because I can't remember when this was, but I struggled with this a bit. One question is, we had, I think it was a Valley Task Force, declared Cwmbran as a hub around here. That's not, did we forget that, or did we leave it out on this? That was number one question. Number two, I kind of remember we talked through it if I was the thing I was on. Number two is, I sat through something in the Brecon Beacons with the high-level civil servant talking about this very question in South East Wales area, talking about this very question about employers and people working for them, and this scrutiny here is struggling with it, because what you're saying there about the aspirations of the people that live in our area and the various high level and low level, and we're doing it around the new hospital where we're putting higher level. We're trying to put in higher level employment. We've got some people in the area going to university. No, it's in here. Yeah. No, I am trying to go here because why I did that dot routine, because we've got some people that want employment at a lower level and at a higher level. We're trying to fit all our people in there, aren't we? That's why I put that bit in there, because it was really interesting being in another place and seeing this business. And I think that's what you're struggling with, isn't it?
I think so. I know one of your basket of items for this term is the economy and skills strategy. And Dave and I have been, so Dave Leach, who's the head of economy and skills now, he has, we are putting a framework, it's very draft at the moment, about how we can facilitate and support all those different tiers of employment. Meeting employers' needs from our one-man band or our foundational economy, which is just as important as our big employers of what you'd call strategic and international employment as well. And we've got to be able to somehow tread that path. Some things it's within our gift, other things we've got to work with partners on. And that's where the strategy will outline our roles.
Because I just I just got it that we've got people that are coming in who are international. I didn't know a lot about this before until somebody else. Defence contractors, high-level stuff, and then, as you say, you've got the local employer, very low level, and they're all valid. But one of the problems we've got is getting those higher-level jobs in, which are like gold dust. And with Brexit, I'm sorry to say, that was the conversation we were having. No comment about the situation. It's just the reality of the situation. We can lose. Bridget's an example of it.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. It's not about agreeing. No.
Members, can I? Yeah.
No. It says it here about.
Same, but obviously Rachel has already said there's a few streams that are within the visioning items. So you
I'll stay off that. I'm trying not to go there. It's just about what's said on this report.
Yeah. I do think.
Down the lower level.
Yeah, do that. No, I'm trying to say that. Discuss that.
Over the years, when the apprenticeship schemes have been struggling because the companies are not able to afford to take on an apprenticeship, are we still looking at the work experiences through the schools, through the vulnerable people, through the colleges? I mean, they're the ones to get a foothold in the door and look at the skills that they would need and some experience, you know, if they're right for that particular job.
Sorry to interrupt again, but I think we're going down the route of scrutinising the action item and concentrating on the progress against those recommendations that have just been made. So I know, but I know it's difficult because you want to answer those questions, but so that you just need to satisfy yourself that you're happy with progress. And like you said, there's numerous items within visioning. If you're more than welcome to pick it later then, and you can raise all those questions then. When you sorry, I'm sorry.
A bit old school because I can remember the 5-year apprenticeships and having the careers officers in school and working and going on to work experience, and I wonder, are we missing that because we had the MOD, we had girlings and everything, so perhaps, you know, we've all done it, so are we... Can we next move on to the item on the British, the master plan approach? And yes, again, Rachel.
Yeah. So scrutiny, this was a pre-cabinet item where scrutiny received the master plan. Obviously, you know, I'm not going to go into the background to the British. But the Cabinet report was very extensive in terms of what had been done since the purchase in 2016, what the master plan was, how the community had been involved. Obviously, you know, there was 4 key recommendations. They did have an impact in terms of we have now signed a memorandum of understanding with the liaison group. Obviously, you know, in terms of like commercial, there was sort of like priority should be given into resources, into attractive commercial opportunities. Obviously, what we want to do is get the master plan and sort of like the water course work. That's our priority first and foremost. We do have project risks and opportunity logs as scrutiny recommended. You know, for a project of this scale, you know, we have to have, you know, everything lined up. So scrutiny did make an impact. The report then went to Cabinet and was endorsed.
I picked up myself is we're looking at certain things. We should be looking at all the tall wine having a representation, because really this is to do with all the tall wine, isn't it? This is tall wine land, but we're only involved in the local community, which is right, but shouldn't we be involved with more, you know, public service boards and other committees, you know, to give us more engagement?
I can't speak on behalf. I can't speak. The liaison group meetings are public. They're not ones which the council run. It's very, very community led. The British is run like any other council project, whereby we've brought it to members to scrutiny and then it goes to cabinet. So there is no special British committee run by the council.
I think it was an extremely good campaign you've run up there over a hell of a number of years. As such, it was a good scrutiny, and I'd just like to see it come back and put into our visioning box, because I just think you need all the support you've got. I'll leave it like that. I'd like to see it back. Yeah, can I note and just do it like that? Because I think that the campaign they thought was brilliant. Must give it what support we can.
If members, it's just for update for
No,
information.
that's what I've just said.
As a seminar or perhaps as a continuation of this update on recommendation. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just to give members a brief background into this report, it was previously agreed with the WAO that reviews that they carry out will be referred to our audit committee and delegated to the appropriate scrutiny committees for monitoring. Any comments or recommendations you as a committee then make will be reported back to the audit committee for assurance purposes. So, no, that's fine. Okay. So we're asking that you ensure as a committee that you are satisfied that appropriate progress has been made towards the WAO proposals for improvement, and if not, that you have the opportunity today to challenge the officer as to why. Equally, should you decide that adequate progress has been made, you can as a committee recommend that you discontinue monitoring it. So the referral that now comes under the remit of this committee is the WAO's review of community safety in Wales, and Kate is here today to go through it briefly and then open to questions from members.
Lovely, thank you. The Safer Gwent Partnership Board continues to have representation from all of the 5 Gwent community safety partnerships. In Torfaen, we don't have a standalone community safety partnership. The function of this is delivered through the Public Service Board. And it continues to produce the Gwent Strategic Assessment to set out community safety priorities for each area. This is really more of a long-term vision of what we need to do for community safety to raise its profile again throughout Wales. Discussions are ongoing to improve the strategic planning to better coordinate activity for community safety by replacing the existing planning framework with a national strategy supported by regional and local plans. And the Safer Gwent Partnership Board, we believe, is in the right kind of position to be able to do that on behalf of the 5 Gwent local authorities community safety partnership boards. I'm still currently the chair of the Safer Gwent Partnership Board. I think I'm in my 3rd year now. But it's been really kind of positive of linking with other organisations across Wales, one being the Wales Association of Community Safety Officers, the All Wales Antisocial Behaviour Partnership Board, and community safety team members in Torfaen play key roles in chairing those other ones. So I think we're in a really good position here in Torfaen to have oversight, not just in Gwent, but actually throughout Wales, at a lot of the community safety sort of priorities and what we're doing. We've liaised with the Home Office and Safer Gwent members, Public Service Board leads for community safety, of how we can kind of develop a consistent community safety approach across across Gwent. The Home Office and Welsh Government are fully supportive of Safer Gwent Partnership's aims to coordinate community safety, but I think talking to local members and officers, we need to ensure that we maintain local delivery, so that it's not just across Gwent for the priorities, but we still need our local deliveries. Myself, along with the other local authority leads, are developing a clear structure for the Safer Gwent Partnership Board, because that was one of the comments looking at this work and researching this, of how we can better coordinate partnership working. Is how it fits in with the other community safety boards. We have the Area Planning Board, the Vowder SB Board, the Criminal Justice Board, Youth Offenders Service. So we're looking now of how we can actually put a proper structure in place that all of those bodies can kind of feed in, possibly to Safer Gwent, but the Safer Gwent could then bring that then to the Public Service Board. So that's quite a large piece of ongoing work that I'm part of there. It's proposed then that that partnership would deliver an annual report outlining the work for all of those areas, and that could be brought back to each of the 5 public service boards. It has been suggested that an executive board needs to sit above Safer Gwent, and that could comprise of members of the public service boards from each of the 5 areas. But again, that is an ongoing discussion of how that's going to work, and we don't want to set up another tier or another board for the sake of it. And there are discussions then with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner of their commissioning board and how that's going to look. So we're still, working on the best kind of model for that there. The local team and the wider Safer Gwent members have been working closely with the Safer Gwent analysis on the strategic assessment. Some members on a previous scrutiny may have had sight of the local profiles for each area, and we're working with the analysts there to develop those so that members will be able to have sight of their local profile and look at the priority set for each of those. So the priority set at Safer Gwent then are then fed back to the local partners across the 5 local authorities, and this is done through the community safety hubs. The community safety hub approach is that all relevant partners talk to one another on a regular basis to share best practice and offer support. The partners who participate in the fortnightly partnership tasking arrangements also double up as the delivery arm for community safety in Torfaen under the Public Services Board Objective 7 to create safe, confident communities and promote community cohesion. So the Community Safety Hub here is a direct link of trying to deliver that strand within the PSB objectives. Community safety within Torfaen, like all the other local authority areas, are discussed on a quarterly basis under Safer Gwent, which provides regional oversight and guidance to enhance local service delivery. Torfaen was the first community safety hub in Gwent, and it's been used as a model of best practice, and we've supported the development of community safety hubs in all the other 4 local authority areas in Gwent. And the Community Safety Hub as a whole has been put in the basket as a discussion item for visioning, so there's a possibility to go into depth on that a bit more there. Just really to make members aware of the kind of the broadness of the work that we're trying to develop. The team have been supporting Welsh Government and the WLGA and partners across Wales to hold a Building Safer Communities conference. This is next Monday and Tuesday, and one of the aims of that conference is to further develop the recommendations of the Wales Audit Office report and the review of community safety in Wales, to develop an all-Wales community safety network, and that's going to be explored at that. So there will be chief officers and that from Welsh Government, Home Office and that attending that, of how we can continue to progress this. Thanks. Thanks, Rick.
My only question is, are we having all these committees, are we getting done up in bureaucracy rather than actions?
It's a really good point, because I think one of those, when we were looking at an exec board, where partners want to get involved, and a lot of this work we just do this as part of our day jobs, but it was the police, and there are a lot of area organisations across Gwent that attend lots of different meetings, and could they just all of this be done through Safer Gwent? And that was the idea, that rather than have 5 meetings for something, you would just be able to go to Safer Gwent. But I totally take the point of how can we do this, how can we streamline those meetings, and one of the areas that we're looking at within Safer Gwent is who sits around that table, because lots of people wear so many different hats, as you all know, at this time of what are they bringing, and so that we've got the appropriate membership that we are feeding into all the other partnership boards, like, for example, the Area Planning Board, Vider SB. Could that just be done under this conduit and feed in necessarily? But I totally take that.
All I'm concerned, if there's anything important, the decisions can be delayed where there's too many meetings and everybody's talking about the same thing rather than getting anything done.
That was actually the favourite question on the PSB scrutiny the other day, wasn't it? Because you were there, which was who's relevant people. And the other question on that one is who do they talk on behalf, and how they're constituted. Resources is the other one of that as well, because it comes back to Steve's basic question there, doesn't it?
Yeah, as I said, there are so many people that kind of, sit in that arena that are representative of so many, other areas, and just to make sure that each of those areas are, have a voice, but also then that community safety then is represented equally on other partnerships. Yeah, that is a piece of...
Yes, when we did the PSP scrutiny the other day, we had Jeff Cuthbert, the elected official, then we had some people who were representatives, and then I always worry about that, and then we had Steve, who was representing the whole of the voluntary sector, which was, and then how do they disseminate what they do? That must be something, how you communicate, and how do you reflect decisions back on things. I mean, there's no easy answer, I know, but it's always an interesting one.
We all share the concerns, issues as well, and I did, and just hope that we can sort of get through it with an easy and amicable. Against the adopted action plans, and identify any concerns regarding progress, and make recommendations for consideration by the audit committee. Do you feel that we have made appropriate progress? Do you have any concerns, or do you want to keep it monitored? Or are you fully satisfied with everything?
I'm happy with it as it is at the moment, but I'd like to be monitor it so we can keep what's happening.
Is it appropriate to make other recommendations at this point, or just to monitor? What's our brief?
So you can either determine that you're satisfied with all those recommendations and the updates you've received. You can determine that you're satisfied with some and they can be removed and just keep others on there, or you can determine that you're happy that you want to keep them all and want to keep and have this update again next year.
I think it's a big body of work, and maybe an update wouldn't be inappropriate on a yearly basis. I don't think we need to see it any more often than that.
No, this is a report that comes yearly to this meeting, so if you're happy to keep them all on there, that's what you could recommend to the audit committee.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. Obviously, we'd like to see the figures and all the rest of it, and it's the usual scrutiny type sort of answer, as per usual. And I think it's actually a reasonable piece of work that we can actually see this, because before we couldn't. And your discussion point, what's been said to us, is valid, because at the end of the day we didn't know anything about it before. So going from a position, and getting together, and it's the same thing that we had when we talked to the PSB. It's better one meeting reflecting a lot. I take that point of view totally, to be honest.
Anything? Meeting. Can remind you that visioning is next going to take place. Do you want to have a 5-minute break or anything, or do you want to carry on? You can get a cup of tea then. Rachel, would you like a drink? Would you like a drink?